What's up, folks? Justin Garcia, aka Master Chim here. And today what we're going to talk about is the preparation zone, right? So the preparation zone is something that I think a lot of people nowadays, especially given the dilemma that everybody finds themselves in, it's important that everybody knows this. And I don't care if you're somebody who is, super prepper, I've got everything under control, and we have enough food in my house for 2 years, or whatever, all the way down to the guy who is saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have nothing. I don't have any money. I don't have this. I don't have that. No matter what the case is, no matter what the scenario, the predicament, the current crisis is, this is something that holds true. And the goal of understanding this model is staying sort of connected to the best possible outcome, whatever that situation happens to be, right? So in this preparation zone, what we're going to do is we're going to create a spectrum, right? And a zone within that spectrum. Where you see the green is what we call functional behavior, right? So functional behavior is what that green represents. And being prepared means staying within this zone, right? So in this zone of green is what we would call prepared. Now, where this zone tends to go in one direction or the other is the point of this model. It's the value of this model. And one of the things you'll usually hear, and this is, I'm going to say during times where there is not a sort of imminent, crisis or issue that everybody's trying to navigate through, one of the things you'll often hear is this guy's being paranoid, right? So the idea of paranoia, right? Paranoia is increasing one's preparation all the way to the point where it now becomes dysfunctional, right? So if I am somebody who has prepared to the point where I have now crossed over to dysfunction, that is where we use paranoia. Now, what does function mean in this sense? I'm going to use a model that I use to explain it to a lot of my coaching students. And I'll use the example of crossing the street. And none of these numbers are accurate. This is just numbers that I pulled out of nowhere just to illustrate my point. Let's say that whenever you cross the street, if I were to just find a street in front of your house, building the road in front of your property, whatever the case is, let's just say that a man crosses that street, and if he just crosses, he gets hit by a car and run over 90% of the time. And we say 90% is unacceptable. So we decide, instead of just walking across the street, we're going to stop and look both ways. Looking both ways allows us to bring that 90% to, let's say, 50%. Again, these numbers are just made up. I stop, I look both ways. I now only get run over half the time, 50%. Now what I do is I go to the corner. Instead of the middle of the road, I go to where the corner and where there's a crosswalk for people to cross. And I choose to cross there. Now it goes from 50 to 40. I go to the street, I go to the corner, I go to the crosswalk, I cross 40% of the time. Now I go to the street, I go to the corner, I go to the crosswalk, and I wait for a green light. Now I bring that down from 40% down to 5%. If I cross at the crosswalk and wait for the green light, I'm only going to get hit by a car 5% of the time. Finally, what I'm going to do is, and just to add one more level to this, I'm going to go to the road, go to the corner, go to the crosswalk, wait for the green light, and do all of this at a time where there is the least amount of traffic, and that brings me to 1%. So now this process of adding sort of parameters or adding behaviors to reduce the probability of getting hit by a car is exactly what this process represents. But now what needs to happen before we hit that line to where we were now being paranoid? In this model, or the example of using the crossing the street, it is saying, well, if I never cross the street, I'll never get hit by a car, and I will bring it to zero. And it's very hard to argue against that. Well, where is an argument against that? And it lies in function. If you're somebody who never crosses a street, never crosses a road, just how functional are you going to be in life? Are you going to be able to get to work, to school, travel for any reason, to see family, to go and get food, whatever the case is? So there's a line where trying to reduce the exposure to getting hit by a car becomes dysfunctional, right? And that line where whatever it is we're preparing for, if we get to that point where we are now being dysfunctional, we have to recognize that. And also on the other end of that is understanding that by not being paranoid, I am accepting a functional level of risk, right? So we don't want to get to the point where we're now being dysfunctional, but we also want to move along this process. So let's talk about this other end here, right? So this other end we can call, which is also dysfunction, but we call this in this direction being unprepared. So being unprepared, and again, I'm going to use the example of crossing the street, means that I am just going to cross the street and let chance be what it is. And without any conscious investment of energy or resources, I am just going to expose myself to whatever inherent risk lie in crossing the street. And if I get hit by a car, I get hit. If I don't, I don't. So what we see here when we go into dysfunction is we see that there are a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of options that we have that will allow us to better mitigate, reduce our exposure to dysfunction, our exposure to, in this case, getting hit by a car, and we're rejecting them. Probably greater than rejecting them, we're not even pursuing them. We're not even trying to find out how to increase this probability. So now we're in our current situation. So let's get out of the crossing the street and let's talk about the fact that we have the coronavirus spreading around. Understand, there is being made, or it is the motivation, the mission of many sources of information to keep us on one end of this or another. Now, who's keeping us paranoid? All of the people that are looking to leverage fear-driven decisions, okay? I heard a story of an individual who bought something like $3,000 worth of toilet paper because he was worried that they would run out. And he was getting interviewed for a news show. And one would have to ask, okay, $3,000, I guess, yeah, well, you need toilet paper. But at what point are we now using dollars on toilet paper that could be used towards something else? One might say, well, I'm rich. I could do whatever I want. I have enough money to buy as much toilet paper as I want. But again, I would ask, well, okay, is that the best use of that money? If I am, let's say, rich and I am on my estate, maybe I want to take some of my money and rather than just stocking up to what I would say is a dysfunctional level, maybe I take those resources and I invest in helping the people that I come into contact with. Do the people around me have supplies? Do the people around me, the people that are most likely to expose me and my family to this, are they okay? Because that is how we remain productive. That is how we begin to sort of meet the maximum full level of preparation without ever getting paranoid. Remember, paranoia is dysfunction. So every dollar that you would spend in the model that the example I just explained, any dollar that I would spend on toilet paper that could be spent on, let's say that I'm rich, right? So I have a butler, right, or a maid. Let's say it's a dollar that it could be spent on the maid buying hand sanitizer, soap, whatever the case is. Okay, deer just running in my yard. Not now. So maybe soon. But the whole idea is, what is in my power? What am I able to apply in terms of investing my energy and resources to reduce the probability of something happening that would make me dysfunctional without choosing to be dysfunctional myself, right? And we could use just extreme examples to illustrate the concept. A little bit more subtlety is required, a little bit more applying this model to your circumstances. is going to give you a good use of the model. Oh, the air's poison in here. Okay, everybody just don't breathe. Then we don't get, we don't get poisoned. Yeah, but we got to breathe. No, just don't breathe. It's easy to just use these extreme examples, right? So what I'm saying, what's my advice? What's, and I say advice, in context, please understand. Everybody's got to follow your own plan. Everybody, moving along this process and getting to the point where we are maximizing our preparation without becoming dysfunctional, that not only is going to look differently for each one of you, but each one of you may interpret this process differently. And it's not my goal, it's certainly not my position to sort of tell you what you should be doing. But what I will say, none of this requires fear. None of this requires a reactionary, use of our emotion. None of this requires a dysfunctional level of social interaction. And when I say dysfunctional level of social interaction, I could still be polite to somebody and tell them, listen, we're not shaking hands anymore. I could still be polite and do that. I could be polite with somebody and ask them, at the store, hey, do you guys happen to have any more hand sanitizer? I don't need to overreact. I don't need to, make a bad situation worse. Because what am I doing in those instances? A lot of times, because I don't understand what my maximum level of preparation is, a lot of times you get caught being unprepared. So circumstances change, even though your lifestyle is the same, but circumstances change, and you find yourself in a beat going from the middle of this, or maybe on the high end of this, right, to all the way over here. What does that look like? That looks like the wealthy, executive at a company in the middle of a big city, just crushing it, driving his Beamer to work and having the fancy apartment on Fifth Avenue and all that stuff. And then, shit hits the storm, and my man is saying, I don't have any guns, I don't have any food, I don't have any hand sanitizer. It could take that drastic a turn in that short amount of time. Now, the last thing I want to do here is fearmonger. I don't think anybody should be scared of anything going on. But that's not to say that not being scared absolves you from not being prepared. We should right now be exhibiting 3 things. Number 1, discipline, right? We have to have discipline. We need to understand what it is that we need to do and adhere to it, right? Whatever our plan is, we need to adhere to it, which I guess, jumping the gun somewhat, number 1, we need a plan. Everybody needs to have a plan. What is your plan? One of the things that I would, throw out there, how much time do you have supplies for right now? It's not to say that, hey, people freaking out, hoarding. No, I'm not saying buy $500 worth of fucking soup, $2,000 worth of, tuna fish. I'm not saying any of that. But what I'm saying is, just how many days you got? All right, I'm back. A little difficulty here with the whiteboard almost decapitating me, which would have been pretty ironic given the topic of the video. But how many days of supplies do you have? You don't need to hoard. You don't need to get to the point where you are wasting money. If you have the need to go to, the store and purchase things from day to day, don't waste all of your money and wind up with no money for the day-to-day things, sitting there waiting for the hammer to drop and it doesn't. That's being in the poisoned room and just holding your breath. At some point, oh man, I didn't think I'd still be in the room this long. I should have devised a different plan. Another thing is, listen, if, living circumstances, if you are in a circumstance where, listen, if I don't pay my rent, my landlord's throwing me out immediately, well, that's something that you have to consider, and all I would say, I don't want to get into too many specifics and start leading you guys one way or another, but what I want to say is there is that zone of preparation. Everything that is in your power, we should be looking to leverage. You should be looking to take power over it. When we take power over the things that are in our power, we become more powerful, right? And the other side of that, obviously, is not concerning ourselves, not investing resources with things that are out of our control. All right, I once had a session with one of my students, and his father had passed away. And his father passed away, you know, prior to him working with me. And one of the things we were talking about was the use of his time. And one of the programs that he was in was an educational program that was being paid for by a third party. And I had asked him, you know, well, why are you in this program? And it was a rhetorical question. It's just, well, not a rhetorical question. It was an indifferent question, just collecting information. And he said, oh, but it doesn't cost me anything. And that's when I had to tell him, well, it doesn't cost you anything. And I asked him, how much money would you spend to have some more time with your dad? And he's like, well, I said, is there an amount that you could spend? That you could spend another, you know, day or so with your dad who passed away? And he said, no. I said, you mean to tell me that no amount of money is going to replace any of the time that you've spent? Yeah. And you can't spend any more money to get more of it? No. I said, so don't ever think that anything doesn't cost you anything. If at a minimum it costs you your time. And what I will say now is, and I promise you this is the last thing, it is not about reacting to circumstances in a way that puts us in our best situation. It's about maintaining a lifestyle that puts us in our best situation, or best scenario, best position to deal with whatever comes along without making any changes. Right? Little over 4 years ago, I decided to move out of the city. I decided to buy property out in the mountains, and I decided to prepare certain things. A lot of people, you know, told me, "Oh, you're being paranoid. Oh, you're being antisocial. And, you know, okay, that's fine. That's fine. You know, me preparing, you know, by training martial arts. Some of you guys that train martial arts that follow me, you guys know that at some point you've heard, you know, oh, that's, you know, I can't do that. Why would I want to do that? I don't believe in fighting. Everybody, no violence. And we know that they just don't understand how quickly these situations present themselves and how it's better to be prepared. But we do it where the martial arts is concerned by lifestyle. And, you know, this latest, you know, obstacle for society, we'll get through it, you know, as a people, as a species, we'll get through it, you know. But at the tail end of it, you know, I wonder how many people are going to be watching this video 6 months, a year down the line, saying, man, you know, I used to do all those different things when shit hit the fan, according to my standards of shit hitting the fan. But then once we were out of the clear, I just stopped doing all of it. You know, those are the people that, you know, make it that much harder the next time. You know, we have to stay connected with, you know, the universe that we live in, you know, and there are threats. Some of the threats expose us to a risk that we could actually reduce without becoming dysfunctional. All right, guys? So as you guys are watching this and you're going through whatever it is you're going through, understand there's never reason to not be in a good mood. Only the weak mind too, adds suffering to circumstance. When you're in a good mood, you are the best version of you. And what version of you would you want attacking any of these obstacles? I appreciate you guys. Stay strong. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.